They thought I was done after they kicked me out, but when the company I created became their rival, they had no idea the real battle was just beginning. You mean Vanessa will be the business's owner? My hands squeezed beneath the table, but my voice remained firm. Although the dining room's sophisticated chandelier illuminated the table with a cozy glow, the atmosphere had become frigid. As he continued to bite into his steak, my father, Charles Morgan, whose business I had salvaged from bankruptcy, hardly looked up from his plate. He sighed, as if he were describing something basic to a young child. Merlin, let's be realistic. You excel at technological tasks. However, leadership, you're not good at that. Someone with presence is what we need. Someone who is respected. There is no better option than your sister. Vanessa, seated across from me in her expensive gown, smiled slightly and knowingly as she sipped her wine. When Morgan Enterprises was in financial ruin, she had done absolutely nothing to assist. But now that the business was making record profits, she was getting everything. I created the software that kept this business afloat. Now, my voice pierced through the clinking of cutlery with greater clarity. You wouldn't even have a business to pass down without it. Dad laughed, as though I had said something funny. Then he took his wallet out of his pocket and flung a crumpled dollars on the table. For your work. The $50 bill between my plate and my unopened wine glass caught my attention. For the years I had worked late into the night, creating code until my eyes burned, I was paid $50. For all the restless weeks I devoted to studying financial losses, creating a method that would propel us to the top of the business and help us escape bankruptcy. $50 for the invention that made Morgan Enterprises a $450 million powerhouse instead of a decaying relic. Mom looked at me and shuffled uneasily in her chair. However, she remained silent. Nobody did. I turned to face my father, whom I had admired as a child. I had dedicated my life to making this man proud, and I came to a realization at that very instant. Merit was never the issue. It never had to do with hard work, achievement, or even loyalty. It has to do with control. I understand. I was surprised by how quiet my voice sounded. I quietly folded the $50 bill into my napkin after picking it up and flipping it over in my hands. Then I got up. Dad sneered and waved his hand dismissively, saying, "Merlin, don't be dramatic." I grinned. I'm not exaggerating. I'm just making an excuse. I will leave the scene because it is obvious that I am only a supporting character in this household. Vanessa chuckled softly, her laughter scarcely disguised. Merlin, Mom began. However, with my heels clicking on the marble floor, I was already leaving the dining room. The door was not slammed by me. I didn't shout or call for justice. I just walked away. As usual, I got to work early the next morning. Over the past year, the office had undergone changes. The atmosphere had been oppressive only a year before. Workers are chatting about layoffs. Department heads are leaving before the business fails. It was flourishing now. By automating procedures that formerly took weeks to complete, my software has completely transformed the logistics sector. We had secured agreements with leading clients as we had grown internationally. However, something felt different today. I observed a few staff exchanging anxious looks as I moved through the foyer. People whispered as I went by. When I arrived at my workplace, the door was already open. My desk had been cleared out inside. I had lost my PC. Merlin Morgan, CTO, was no longer listed on the nameplate. Vanessa was comfortable scrolling through various documents while seated in my chair. She looked up, her smile dazzling and fake. "Oh, Merlin, good morning. Dad told you, right? This office is where I'll be relocating. You will now report to me." My stomach dropped, but my face remained unflinching. What role do I play? I spoke steadily. Vanessa cocked her head in thought. She then gave a shrug. "We'll come up with a solution. Perhaps something related to IT support. IT assistant. In my own business. In the business I had rescued." She grinned. "Actually, Dad advised you to take a break. Calm down. Work on some hobbies, perhaps. Don't worry, though. You will still have some role in the business." My heart pounded in my ears as I inhaled slowly. They desired my departure, following all of my actions, following each sacrifice, every late night, all of the solutions I had developed to sustain this business. I was being thrown away as if I were an afterthought, as if I were worth $50. My sister caught my attention. Then I noticed Morgan Enterprises' logo on the glass walls outside my office, a name that formerly connoted legacy, devotion, and family. It only meant treachery now. I didn't argue, though. I didn't object. I just gave a nod. Comprehensive. I turned and left after that. They believed they had triumphed. They assumed I would vanish in silence. They didn't know what was going to happen. With my pulse steady and my head held high, I left the office. They believed that I had been buried. They believed I would vanish. I'll take whatever scraps they threw at me. Perhaps even plead to stay. However, one idea lingered in my head as I entered the elevator and the doors closed. Keep an eye on me. My initial action was to disappear. Not exactly. Nevertheless, I arrived to work the following morning. I was still seated at the farthest part of the building at the small desk they had given me, surrounded by interns who were still unaware of my identity. I didn't fight back, though. I refrained from arguing. I observed, and I witnessed firsthand what was taking place in less than a week. Vanessa was in a lot of trouble. She didn't know how to manage a business, much less one that had recently grown into a multi-million-dollar empire. She made decisions based on intuition rather than factual information while spending her days in never-ending meetings. She replaced department heads who attempted to counsel her with her buddies, individuals whose sole qualification was their knowledge of the best wine-cheese pairings. The business was more than merely at risk. It was in danger of collapsing once more. And everything they were currently demolishing was something I had built. That's when I decided what to do. I'd start a larger company if they didn't want me at Morgan Enterprises. I sat across from three of the smartest, most skilled people I had ever worked with in a coffee shop late one evening, long after most of the staff had left for the day. Our old CFO, Ryan, was an expert in every financial nook and cranny and had kept the accounts balanced when the company was in financial distress. Sophie is the industry's top data analyst. She had essentially started from scratch when creating our consumer profiling system. We had coded most of my program together around 2:47 a.m. under the influence of caffeine and sheer desperation, so Ethan, our lead engineer, was the only one who understood it as well as I did. Within the last month, all three have quietly quit. They were not stupid. The writing on the wall was visible to them. Ryan leaned forward and said, "Merlin," with a serious gaze, "what's going on here?" I gave them a look, then took a folder out. Everything I had been secretly working on was in there. I explained plainly, "We're building something new." I didn't have to persuade them. They were in. Vanessa and my father had failed to see one thing. Yes, Morgan Enterprises was the name of the software. In a technical sense, they did possess the rights to it. However, the original code was written by me long before I ever integrated it into the business. Furthermore, I had never uploaded the most recent version, the one with the most sophisticated features, to their servers. I still owned it. I worked silently for the following month, enhancing it, strengthening it. Quicker. I then made a pitch to Morgan Enterprises' rivals, not to them. I had 3 offers in 3 weeks. I had an agreement by the end of the month. A $50 million deal. Suddenly, I wasn't merely vying with Morgan Enterprises, I was going to ruin them. The first hint of problems for my father's business appeared inconspicuously. A client who has been with Morgan Enterprises for more than 10 years abruptly terminated their agreement. Then another, and yet another. Vanessa went into a panic. She began to insist on answers, firing individuals without cause, pointing fingers at everyone but herself. However, the reality was straightforward. The industry had changed. Their rivals' systems were now being operated by the next generation of software, which I had developed. Suddenly, Morgan Enterprises was out of date. And I had only just begun. 6 months later, the time arrived. I was enjoying a glass of champagne in a posh hotel ballroom while the keynote speaker concluded their talk. One of the largest industry gatherings of the year was the Tech Innovators Gala. Every significant executive, investor, and CEO was present, and I was the honored guest this year. I got up and walked onto the stage as my name was called, my heels clicking on the shiny stage. The MC stated, "Tonight, we honor the visionaries driving the industry forward." Merlin Morgan has revolutionized the way multinational organizations function by developing the most innovative logistics software available today. The current valuation of her business, Nova Systems, exceeds $650 million. The cheers were thunderous. However, I noticed a familiar face as I peered out into the crowd. My dad, sitting beside Vanessa in the rear. Their business was in danger of going bankrupt once more. Both of them were aware of it. I grinned, not with malice, not in retaliation. However, because I had at last grasped the lesson they had been trying so hard to impart to me, I didn't require their approval. On my own terms, I had prevailed. Furthermore, they were powerless to stop me this time. That embarrassing supper had been exactly a year ago. It has been a year since my father told me I wasn't good enough and threw a crumpled $50 bill on the table. Knowing that she was receiving something for which she had never labored, my sister gave me a sly smile a year ago. It's been a year since I won the war and left without a fight. I could hardly contain my smile as I sat at the head of the Nova Systems conference table going over our most recent quarterly report. $410 million in revenue. 48% of the market is growing. Morgan Business. They were gushing blood. I had methodically eliminated all of their advantages. Their customers had defected. Their stock was in ruins. And only 1 week earlier, their most recent financial report, which had been leaked to the media, confirmed the worst. They were in danger of going bankrupt. At that point, the inevitable occurred. My assistant buzzed into my office at exactly 10 in the morning. "Your sister and father are here to visit you, Merlin." I took a deep breath and sat back in my chair. Thus, this was the end result. Send them in. They entered as if they were ghosts. Vanessa's expensive clothes were unable to conceal the fatigue in her eyes. My father, who was always so calm and confident in himself, appeared older, defeated. They were aware that they had lost. My father said, "Merlin," in a measured tone. "We must speak." I pointed to the chairs facing my desk. They paused, most likely because they realized they were entering my area for the first time in their lives. However, they sat. Vanessa's nails tapped the armrest as she shifted uneasily. She refused to look at me. Dad let out a sigh. "We've had our disagreements. You see, ultimately, though, we are family. Morgan Enterprises is having difficulties. We need your assistance." Oh, it was there. As I watched them writhe, I let the quiet grow. I finally said something. "And what precisely do you want me to do?" Dad bent over. "We're prepared to give you a position of leadership. Something significant. I now see that we might have undervalued you." I cocked my head. "You see now?" When Vanessa did look up, her face was tense. "Don't be petty, Merlin. Please, we need you." I chuckled. In fact, I laughed. "You need me," I said again. "It's funny because you said I wasn't a good leader a year ago. I was just good at technical things. You said." Dad had the audacity to display his frustration. "You are aware of how business operates. Choices were made. However, we must now proceed. We can restore Morgan Enterprises together if you return." Once more there it was, control. I wasn't wanted by them. They desired to possess me. Additionally, what job are you offering? I pretended to be interested as I asked. As though to seal the deal, Dad straightened his shoulders. "Second in command would be you, directly below Vanessa." I blinked. Then I laughed once more, louder than before. Vanessa's face reddened. "Merlin, mature. Okay, so you developed some software. However, that does not imply that you are capable of managing a business of our scale." I ceased to laugh. I put my arms on the desk between us and leaned forward. Additionally, I made sure my voice was as icy as possible. Vanessa, I murmured, my business is valued at $650 million. Yours is just a few weeks away from going bankrupt. Tell me once more, which of us lacks business management skills? Quiet, quiet, blissful silence. Dad cleared his throat. Please, Merlin. That word was the decisive factor. Please. The same father who, rather than his daughter, had fired me, denigrated me, and threw money in my face as though I were an unworthy employee, was pleading now, and I felt calmer than ever before. No. Vanessa tensed. Pardon me? I said no, I stated again. Morgan Enterprises is not necessary for me. I was necessary to you, and you tossed me out. You made a decision. You now have to deal with it. Dad's voice grew frustrated as he let out a harsh exhale. Are you really going to allow your own family to fail? I didn't allow anything to happen, I said coolly. The once you placed Vanessa in charge, you ruined this business. Vanessa abruptly stood up and pushed back from her chair. Now her face was crimson. You're simply resentful, she yelled. You've been envious of me all your life. I smiled slowly and amusedly at her. Are you jealous? I don't have to feel envious, Vanessa. I already have everything of your desires. I straightened my blouse and stood up too. Now pardon me, I have a real business to manage. In quiet ire, my father departed. Vanessa bounded out, but she turned back before she vanished through the doors. Merlin, I hope you're content. I stared at her, completely at ease. Yes, Without saying another thing, she left. I sat back down and let out a breath as the doors closed behind her. Then I grinned. Since I've never in my life, at last I was free. I let out a long, slow breath as soon as the doors behind my father and sister closed. They believed they could enter, offer me a few flimsy excuses, and then expect me to rush back to tidy up their mess. They were unaware of my transformation. Even while I liked seeing them wriggle, I knew that this was not the end of it. Enterprises Morgan was dying. Additionally, everything and everyone are pulled down with a sinking ship. I was asked if I would allow that to occur. 3 days later, the news was released. Officially, Morgan Enterprises had filed for bankruptcy. It was all over. Publications for business, online discussion boards, even the national news. Morgan Enterprises, a former titan of the industry, collapses overnight. A $450 million business is sunk by poor leadership decisions. How Morgan Enterprises were destroyed by greed and family politics. What's the best part? I was given credit for the company's prior success in every article. All of them emphasized the obvious. The sole explanation for Morgan Enterprises' survival of its initial near collapse was as a result of the software I developed. And after I left, it was just a question of time. Jenna, my assistant, knocked on my office door while I was in a meeting. This is something you might want to see, Merlin. A printed document was given to me by her. I skimmed it quickly, and when I got to the last paragraph, a tiny smirk formed on my lips. The liquidation of Morgan Enterprises was underway. Everything was for sale. The headquarters structure, the remaining resources, the Morgan name itself, even Dad needed help badly. In an attempt to save the company, he took out loans, which led to over-leverage. And now everything was being taken by the banks. I could also purchase it. The poetic justice was nearly flawless. I pondered what I wanted that night while sitting in my penthouse apartment with a view of the city. It had taken me so long to prove myself. Fighting against those who had rejected, deceived, and denigrated me took up a lot of my energy, and now I was already victorious. Did I have to crush them anymore? I remembered that night a year ago, when my father threw $50 on the table as if it were a waitress tip, as if I had no value. With that, my choice was made very evident. The following morning, I took the initiative. I didn't use an investment company. No third party was used by me. I wanted them to be aware of the precise person stealing everything. I therefore gave the bankruptcy lawyer in charge of Morgan's liquidation a call myself. I'd like to place a direct bid on all Morgan Enterprises assets, I said. Include the name. The lawyer paused. Miss Morgan, do you understand what that would mean? I grinned. I understand perfectly. A week later, I found myself seated in the exact boardroom that my father had once dominated like a monarch. I was the one with the crown this time, though. The paperwork was spread out before me, a sleek black and gold pen resting on top of the final contract. With a single signature, Morgan Enterprises would belong to me. The empire my father had built, the one he refused to let me lead, was now mine. Vanessa and Dad sat across from me, both of them ashen-faced. Dad looked like he had aged another 10 years in the preceding week. Vanessa wouldn't even make eye contact. I still can't believe you're doing this, she whispered. I arched an eyebrow. Doing what? Buying a failed company. Acquiring a name that no longer holds any value. She scowled. You know what I mean. I sat back in my chair, pressing my fingers against the smooth wood of the table. Funny, isn't it? A year ago, you didn't think I was capable of operating a corporation, but now you're acting like I have too much power. Dad breathed sharply. Merlin, just sign the damn papers. I picked up the pen, paused, and then I slid the paperwork back across the table. Dad blinked. Vanessa scowled. What is this? Inquired Dad. Simply a counteroffer, I said. Scanning the first page, he took up the papers. His gaze expanded. You're dissolving Morgan Enterprises. Vanessa took a sharp breath. You're shutting it down? I grinned. That's right. My dad appeared to be on the verge of blowing up. Why would you do that? I spoke calmly as I leaned forward. Because I don't need Morgan Enterprises. I never did. But I do want one thing. I indicated one clause on the final page. Dad's breath caught as he followed my finger. Vanessa grabbed the paper and shook her voice as she read it out loud. All remaining rights to the Morgan name, patents, and intellectual property will be absorbed by Nova Systems and permanently retired. Angrily, she glanced up at me. You're not just buying it, you're erasing it. I looked directly into her eyes. Yes, there would never be another Morgan Enterprises. They would never rebuild the name. The business would never be revived. Like they'd attempted to make me vanish, it would just vanish. Dad's jaw tightened. You're just doing this to get back at us. No, I clarified. I'm doing this because some things deserve to die. I took up the pen once more. I signed this time. It was over in an instant. The days of Morgan were over, and Nova Systems took its place. With my father's defunct company as our only rival, we grew quickly and won exclusive contracts that had previously gone to Morgan Enterprises. They had lost their legacy. Mine had just started. I got a letter 3 months later. There's only a handwritten message inside, no return address. Merlin, I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I'm hoping you'll get it eventually. Dad, I looked at it for a while. I threw it into the fireplace after that, and as the last of Morgan Enterprises was destroyed by the fire, I grinned, because I had won, finally, totally. It had been 3 months since I had wiped out Morgan Enterprises. It has been 3 months since I signed the last document, guaranteeing that the name would never be raised. It has been 3 months since my sister and father left that boardroom empty-handed. Nevertheless, for the first time since it all started, I was at peace. Nova Systems was doing well. Since Morgan Enterprises was no longer a threat, we had grown rapidly and acquired all of the significant clients that had previously made my father proud. $650 million in revenue, 68% market domination, status the industry's undeniable leader. However, I wasn't particularly satisfied with the numbers. I found satisfaction in witnessing a business founded on merit every morning when I walked through my office, seeing workers who were employed on their abilities rather than their connections, observing a business I founded without obtaining my family's consent. Despite my desire to move on, the past had a curious way of hanging on, particularly when I received the invitation. The envelope it came in was unlabeled, a straightforward card in cream with sophisticated gold lettering. The annual gala of the Morgan family. I had completely forgotten about it. For as long as I can remember, my parents have organized the most prestigious event in the business each year. When they were still in charge, my father wasn't hosting it this year. Another person had taken over, someone who, upon bankruptcy, purchased their mansion at auction. It was all a formality, this invitation. Whoever was in charge of it now probably didn't know about my past relationship with the Morgans. The fact that I even got one was an accident, but I decided to keep it instead of discarding it. I was leaving, not to establish anything, not to exact revenge, but to put a definitive end to this tale. On the evening of the gala, I showed up wearing a chic, specially tailored black gown. The serene assurance of a lady who had nothing more to prove. She stepped out of my car. The occasion was just as lavish as I recalled. A sea of affluent elites sipping champagne as if they still controlled the world, sparkling chandeliers and sophisticated music. However, this time, the room's most powerful person was me. They were all aware of it. As I entered, whispers trailed after me. Is that Merlin Morgan? No, she runs Nova Systems now. Didn't she destroy her father's company? I choose to disregard them. For them, I wasn't present. I had one reason for being here. Then I caught sight of them. My sister and father. They were no longer the focus of attention. They weren't encircled by influential business people negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts. They were off to the side instead, a shadow of their former selves. Compared to what I remembered, my father appeared smaller. What I had never seen in him before, remorse, had taken the place of his once dominant presence. Vanessa, however, continued to exalt herself. But her mask had flaws that I could see. The way her fingers tightened around her champagne glass's stem. Her eyes flicked from me to me and back again. I was in charge for the first time in our lives. Both of them were aware of it. With my heels clicking on the shiny floor, I approached them. Vanessa tensed. My dad turned, and I saw a glimpse of something flickering in his eyes. Not rage, not bitterness. Simply lose. His voice was quieter than I had ever heard him say, Merlin. I cocked my head a bit. Dad. We were silent for a long time. Then he let out a sigh. I guess this is where you take pride. I grinned a little. No, father. This is where I bid you farewell. Vanessa blinked. What? I went on. I didn't come here to shove this in your faces. To be honest, I'm not concerned about that anymore, so I didn't come to remind you of everything you lost. I placed my drink on a passing tray and gave my father one more look. I have dedicated years of my life to gaining your acceptance, attempting to demonstrate my worth. I let out a slow breath, but that is no longer necessary for me. I looked across at Vanessa. I also don't despise you. I simply feel sorry for you. Her expression tensed. I answered, because I didn't have to steal power like you did. I constructed my own. She opened her mouth a little. However, nothing was said. She was silent for the first time. I took one last look at them both. Then I turned to leave. Not because I was angry, not in retaliation. However, because, in my life, for the first time, I had freedom. Without turning around, I walked out of the gala. Without having to provide any evidence. Because retaliation was never the point of this. This has to do with becoming the person I was destined to be. And as I got into my vehicle and drove back to a business with a legacy, the future that was entirely mine, I grinned because my narrative didn't finish here. It was only the start. In the end, true revenge isn't about retaliation. It's about finding peace within yourself and thriving on your own terms. It's about letting go of the past and focusing on building something greater than what was taken from you. When you choose silence, success, and growth over anger and revenge, you take back control. If you're struggling with betrayal, remember to protect your heart, invest in your future, and heal at your own pace. You deserve peace. Share your experiences in the comments. Let's support each other and move forward together. What's your way of letting go and rising above?